Hello, my dear students and the rest of the learners. Welcome to part 42 of a 95-part series of tutorials in object-oriented programming in C++. In this presentation, we are going to continue looking on the characteristic of object-oriented programming that we call inheritance. Our focus will be on what we call friends. And therefore, this presentation is about inheritance and friends. My name is MemJM, or you can simply call me Emily Swap. A friend class is a class that has been declared using the friend specifier in the list of members for another class, using the keyword friend in the prototype in that class's private or public section. Friendship is thus not inherited, and a class does not become a friend to a class to which its parent is a friend. Therefore, even though the protected and private levels of internal protection for members of a class may be set, such that these members cannot be accessed from outside the same class at which they are declared, this rule can be transgressed with the use of the friend keyword in a class, by means of which we can allow that an external function gain access to the protected and private members of the class. In addition, we can also define a class as a friend of another class, thus enabling it to access, that is, inherit, all the protected and private data and method members of that class. My dear students and the rest of the learners, if you go through the presentations that I have posted in MLSwap ICT YouTube channel, especially under programming using C++, you are going to see a presentation in which I talked about friends. In addition, in this series of object-oriented programming, there is presentations that are talking about friend functions as well as friend classes. It is therefore important, my dear students and the rest of the learners, for you to be able to go to MLSwap ICT YouTube channel from where you are accessing this video and then go through the friend functions or friend classes so that you can be able to gain adequate knowledge and do thorough revision in as far as friends are concerned. And therefore, we are saying we can define a class as a friend of another class. When you define a class as a friend of another class, that class that has become a friend of another is able to access or inherit the protected and private data and method members of that class. For example, in the following program, we have declared CRectangle class as a friend of C-square class. When this program is executed, you are going to see that it's going to give an output of 49. To learn more, just as I have said, about friend methods and the classes, you can listen to part 27 and part 28 videos in this series of object-oriented programming as posted in MLSwap ICT YouTube channel. So this sample program is implementing a friend class. And note, more details about friend classes and friend methods can be found in the presentations series number 27 and 28 of this set of presentations. So we have our comment is inheritance and friends, as include the stream using namespace standard. And then we have our base class, which is C-square. Now, in this case, we can just call this class. So it is a class by the name C-square. Now, this is a prototype. This is a prototype. It's simply a declaration. It's a declaration of the class called C square. Its definition are appearing later in this program. Then we have the next class called C rectangle. Now, this C rectangle contains two private members who are width and height of type integer. And then we have a method which is of public domain by the name area. It is expected to return a value to the calling function, but it's not going to receive any parameter. Now, what this program is, or this method is going to do is similar to what we did in the previous series of this presentation, that is series number 41, where we came across a method that was computing the area. So this function or this method is expected to compute the area of a rectangle by multiplying width by height and returning the result to the calling function. And the next method in this class is convert. Now, this convert, or this method called convert, is receiving one parameter. What parameter is it receiving? It is receiving the class. It is receiving, in fact, what it is receiving is the instance of the class called C square. An instance of the class called C square. By the look, you can easily see that the parameter here is similar to the previous parameters, or the way we write other parameters. C square is the type. C square in this case is the type. So the value in A, the value that is going to be brought as A is of type C square. And that's all with the definition of the class C rectangle. Now you can see that this is a prototype. It is a prototype of the method. And then we have the end of that class. Next is the definition of the class that we have called C square. My dear students and the rest of the learners, note that if you are going to make use or to refer to a class that you have not defined in advance, it is always good to prototype that class before you use it anywhere in the subsequent class. So the reason as to why we prototyped C square at this point is because we are already referring to that a class under the class C rectangle. You can see we are referring to C square, where we are receiving the parameter of the class C square with or as a method within C rectangle. So once you're prototyped, you can define your class later. And that's what I have done at this point. So here we have the definition of our class called C square. Now this class has two public members. Now that is as of this point, we can see one member is side. Now, side is a data member whose content is going to be of type integer, followed by another method, a method by the name setSide. This method is receiving a parameter by the name A of type integer, and it's not expected to return any value. That's why it is void. Now, what is this method going to do? Remember, in object-oriented programming, we call functions methods if they are within a class. So what this method is doing, it is assigning the value received as parameter by the name A into the data member of this class by the name side. So the value which is being received is being assigned into the memory location or the data member called side. And that's what the method called setSide is expected to do. Next, we are having this prototype here. Now, what is this prototype doing? It is informing the compiler that the class called CRectangle, the class called CRectangle is a friend to the class called C-square. So by the virtue that we have this definition here, or you can even call it declaration if you want, we are already informing our compiler that through the class called C-square, we can be able to access the members of the class called CRectangle. And that's all, and as far as the definition of the class called C-square is concerned. Next is the definition of our next class. Now, is this a class? No, it is definition of the function. Which function? The function that we called convert. Note that here we are using scope resolution operator. Scope resolution operator. What does this scope resolution operator mean? It simply means that convert is a method of the class called CRectangle. You can see that. Here is our class called CRectangle. And you can see that convert has been prototyped within the class called CRectangle. If we were to do the definition of this class inside or within the class called CRectangle, we would not use the scope resolution operator. So any type, just as I said in the previous presentations in this series, if you want to define a method outside its class, it's always important for you to use what we call the scope resolution operator. But what you need to do is to prototype that method within the class in which it belongs. And then you define your prototyped method outside of the class. And that's what we are doing here. So their statement simply means that convert is a method which is not expected to return any value to the caller. And this method called convert is only accessible within the class called CRectangle. Now, this convert, just as we saw, it is receiving a parameter of type C-square, and that parameter is A. Then we define it. Now, what this statement is simply saying is that receive the value, receive the value that is generated that is generated. Receive the value that is generated by site, and that is A dot site, and store that value into the member called width. Receive the value that is accessed through A dot site. Receive that value and store it or assign it in the member called width. Now, what does this mean? It simply means that site is being accessed through A. Site is being accessed through A. And what is A? A, in our case here, you can see, is an instance, of C square, of class called C square. Next is get the value accessible through instance A. So get the value that is generated by A.site and store it or assign it in the member called height. My dear students and the rest of the learners, the question is, which class contains width and height? The class which contains those two members is C rectangle. But as you can see, C rectangle is a thread, the class called C square. And therefore, the instance for the class C square, which I'm calling A, the instance for the class C square, which I'm calling A, is then able to access the members of the class into which it is a thread. So the members of the class called C rectangle. That is why it is able to assign the value received into width and into height. So through the instance called A, that's expected to manipulate the class called C square, we are able to access the value that has been stored inside in the member called site. So the value in the member called site, which is accessible through the instance called A, is what we are assigning in width. And that is also what we are assigning into height. I repeat, my dear students and the rest of the learners, this function here, convert, is receiving a parameter. Which parameter? The instance for the class called C square. And in this case, we are calling it A. Now, once the instance for the class called C square has been received by a convert method, then it simply means that we can be able to manipulate or access the members of the class called C square using that instance. And therefore, that's what we are saying, that access the value of the member called site who is accessible through the instance A. In other words, we are accessing the value of the member called site from C square class. And that value, we are assigning it into width. And who is having width? It is C rectangle. Then the same applies to height. And that's what that method is doing. From there, we can go to the main function. Now, under the main function, we are declaring an instance called SQR for the class called C square. We are also declaring another one called rect of type C rectangle. So the instance SQR is able to access the members of the class, or is able to manipulate the class called C square, or the instance called rect is able to manipulate the class called C rectangle. From there, we are invoking a function. We are invoking a method called setSide. And as we invoke it, we are passing it into it value 7. Now, setSide is being accessed through the instance called SQR for C square. Let's see if C square has setSide. Yes, C square has the method called setSide. So we are passing into 8 value 7. So value 7 will be received as parameter, and then that value 7 will be assigned in the member called side. So as it stands, we are now able to know that the value stored or assigned in the member called side is 7. Why? Because we are passing into 8. We are passing 7 as an argument and received as a parameter for the method called setSide, which belongs to the class called C square. Next, we are passing the instance of the class called C square to the method called convert as a parameter, meaning we are giving convert the right to be able to access C square. That's what it means. Because SQR is an instance of C square. So once this statement is invoked, it simply means that SQR, that instance, will be passed over to convert. That is this point here. So SQR is what is being received as A. Remember, the name of the parameter in the method does not need to match with the name of the argument. What is required is the type to be the same. So that is why then this method called convert will be able to access the value stored in the member called side, who belongs to C square. And the same to height. So this statement here, by the virtue of passing the parameter SQR, which is an instance, it means or implies that convert then is able to access the values, and especially 7, that is under setSide method, which belongs to C square. So that will be done, and once that is done, the result will be sent where? Note, the statement reads rect.convert. So we are getting the instance called SQR. We are passing it to convert, but the convert belongs to which class? Note, convert belongs or is a friend. Convert, I repeat, convert belongs to C rectangle. So convert is a method at a C rectangle. So once we invoke this statement, it simply means that convert is a method under the class called C rectangle because we are accessing convert through the instance called rect. And rect is an instance of rectangle. So once the execution is complete and the results brought back to the caller, now which results will be brought back? Are we going to bring back any results? No. Convert is void. It's not expected to return any value. So once this statement or once this brace is executed, then we are going to go back to the main function and the compiler will move on and execute the next statement. So the next statement is to output the results that will be generated by the method called area. Output the results that will be generated by the method called area, which is accessible through the instance called rect. So what will that be? Remember, rect is an instance of rectangle. So this is the method that is being invoked. Remember that already we have been able to receive 7 as the value of site. We have been able to receive the value 7 as a.site. So that means width and height will be value 7. Each will be value 7. And therefore, it means that the area will be, or once that statement is invoked, it will be able to generate a value which is 7 times 7, giving 49. And 49 will be returned the main program, the main function. So here, value 49 will be received. And that value then will be displayed on the screen. That's what that statement means. That whichever value that's going to be generated by the method called area, which is accessible through the instance called rect, write it out on the screen. So once that value is displayed, the cursor will be dropped one line, and then the control will be taken back to the operating system, and the program would end. Now, my dear students and the rest of the learners, let's see what will happen if we code this program in our C++ editor. So we are going to load C++, and then you can copy this program. Just copy this program. That means write this program in your Word or in your Word processor or Notepad. And then just copy it and paste it in C++ editor, or copy this statement, this program in your exercise book, dry run it, and then copy it and paste in C++ program, and then you can compile it and execute it to see what you are going to get. Therefore, let me load my C++ program. Let me start my C++ program. So I will look for C++ program. Here it is, Microsoft Visual C++ 2010. Then I'll click on new project, Win32 console. And then here, I will call my program or my project inheritance and friends. Inheritance and friends. Remember, you should always give your project and your program meaningful names. That is, names whose function or names that imply what the program or the project does. So my my program, I'll call it my source code file, I'll call it inheritance and friends. So this is my IDE. IDE is Integrated Development Environment, the area in which, or the section in which you code your program, your source code. So I'll open my program. This is my program here, which I've already typed. So I'll just copy it. Do the same also if you already have your program, or if you have copied this program in your word processor, like what I have done. If you have not, and if you have copied this program in your Access book, just type each of the statements one after the other, ensuring that the syntax is okay. But if you have already typed it in a word processor, just paste it here, the IDE. So this is my program. Then once you have coded your program, you save it. From there, for Visual C++ 2010, to compile, you click on Build Solution. So we are compiling our program. There we go. This tells us that our program has been successful. That means that this source code has been converted into object code successfully. And therefore, we can now execute it. Remember, object code is the code that is directly understood by the translator or by the compiler, by the processor. It is directly understood by the machine. So our processor is able to know what our program wants because the source code has been converted into object code, or what we call machine language. So to execute, because it has no errors, I'll click on debug, then start without debugging. Remember, for other versions of C++, you may not need to click on debug. You may have other options like execute after compiling. And as you can see, my dear students and the rest of the learners, just as I have said, this program is displaying value 49. It is displaying value 49, just as I have explained. From there, we are just going to click or press on any key, continue. And that's all with our program. And that's how we implement our program that is making use of friend in C++. And with that, we have come to the end of part 43 of the 95-part series of tutorials. And that is part 42. With that, we have come to the end of part 42 of the series. You can now continue and watch, listen, and practice part 43 of 95, in which we are going to learn about the pointers to objects. Congratulations for learning part 42 of 95 on inheritance and difference. You can access videos for the other parts in object-oriented programming series, as well as other computer or ICT videos by clicking or tapping on EmerySwap ICT YouTube channel below this video. Remember to subscribe to the channel by tapping on subscribe button below this video in YouTube if it's not currently reading as subscribed. You can also join EmerySwap ICT YouTube channel as a special member by clicking on join and then following the prompts that will be displayed. You do that if you want to ask special questions, you want to gain early access to the presentations before they appear as public, and also you click on join as a special member when you want to interact directly with EmerySwap himself. For any further correspondence, kindly write to us through the email emeryswap@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening to me. Let's meet in part 43 of this series, and God bless.